We have, in the last couple of weeks, been working through John chapter 6, verses 24 through 35, and I would encourage you to see those messages online. As was just read, what you have here is a scenario where people are looking for Jesus, and they have their reasons for looking for him. And Jesus says that they need to go beyond those specific reasons. And they put a lot of effort into this. Jesus is saying, this is where your focus needs to be. And so he pushes them beyond what they see and what they experience, because the signs that he did, well, they were pointing to something more significant, and they were standing in front of the one that encompassed this significance. Specifically, that he has, that is Jesus, been sent by God to satisfy the deepest needs, fill the deepest void that humans have. And so essentially Jesus says, you come, you believe, I fill, I satisfy, I make whole. Just as we have been going through in John 6, we all have desires. We all have things that we refer to as needs, and we busy ourselves with trying to satisfy these. But we too must look beyond these for the true fulfillment that they're pointing us to. And many of the needs that we feel on the surface represent these deeper spiritual needs. And it makes sense because God has created us as spiritual beings, and we have spiritual needs that only He can meet. It's the reason we feel what I have been referred to as a void, and that's a result of this disconnect from God. Genesis 1 and 2, if you remember things that we've covered. And in fact, what David said this morning, directly connects to that very concept, showing us the depths through which God was willing to go in order for us to be reconnected with Him. And we know that need is there, that desire is there, that the void is there. We can feel it from time to time, and we seek to satisfy it through various means. But at some point, we have to realize that all the things the energy that we expend, so much of that to attain things, to achieve things, is simply those things that we acquire. They don't ultimately satisfy. And while the pursuit of these pleasures and relationships, money, power, and other things, it may satisfy for a short time, the void still remains. We must realize that we cannot fill this lingering void on our own. We were created to have a relationship with God and to experience a true peace within us. And that missing peace, that void that I've been referring to, that's inside all of us, is caused by our separation from God. And it is a separation that Jesus came to heal. That's why Luke chapter 1, verse 79, speaking of Jesus saying that he came to guide our feet in the way of peace. We have to begin to see all of these connections, that disconnect from God, and then us being reconnected to Him is more than just some philosophical idea. And just knowing all of this intellectually is not enough. Just knowing it intellectually is not enough. We must act upon it by entrusting ourselves, which is why Jesus said, this is the work, that you entrust yourself in Him who He, that is God, has sent, John 6:29, which is not just some philosophical idea. It's a reality. Because the greatest spiritual need that any of us have is being reunited to our Creator. When we are reunited to Him, that's when true transformation begins to take place, where we can truly become who we were intended to be. That's what Jesus does. He says in John 6:35, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. Well, of interest is this. The verbs here are in the present tense, which indicates a continual action. And so here is the picture. As we come to him continually. Really, it's a picture of abiding. See, because when we think of continually, we think we come to him and then we leave him and then we come to him. That typically ends up being what happens. It's kind of like the depiction of our life, but the picture is not that. A picture is more of an abiding thing. You come to him and you stay in him. You stay with him, being in him. You make the choice and you're there and you live in that, right? So the picture is as we come to him continually and continually entrust ourselves to him, we are continually satisfied. Now that either means something or it doesn't. Unfortunately, I truly do feel, and I know this from my own experiences, that for a lot of people, what it means to be a Christian, well, it looks like more like this. See, because we know things intellectually. I want you right now, let's just do a little bit of exercise, okay? You're not going to have to get up, so, although maybe some of you should. I want you right now to think about food. It's probably the worst thing to do, right? Because it's like almost lunchtime. But it's the thing on your mind, or at least probably the easiest thing for you to think of right now. Think about some food, okay? I want you to think about your favorite, absolute favorite dish. It can be a dessert, it can be nobody's favorite dish is a casserole. Maybe it is. I don't mean to offend you. Maybe it is. Whatever it is, you think about your favorite dish, okay? Maybe it's something your mother cooked, maybe your father cooked it, maybe it's, whatever it is. Maybe you're thinking about what you're going to eat after here, okay? Think about that. I want you to picture it in your mind, okay? Picture it in your mind. If it's one of those chocolate lava cakes, right? The moist and the smell, I want you to picture it in your mind. Can you smell it? Can you see it? Can you taste it? Do you have it in your mind? You have it in your mind? You need a little bit longer? Think about it. Dwell upon it. Think of another language that you can use to talk about it, even. You got it? We're there? You feel satisfied? You feel satisfied? Your mouth's no longer watering, is it? You feel good, right? You feel full? You feel satisfied? No, you don't. And if you do, you need to get that checked out. The reality is we know this, right? Just knowing about food will not satisfy you. Okay? Right? You actually have to take the food and you have to ingest it. Right? It's only then that you are satisfied. See, here's the thing. It's the same way with Christianity. See, I'm afraid that and don't let it be this way, that being a Christian has kind of only amounted up to knowing about it. Like you're aware of it and you know about it. Like you know, like I'm telling you, when I love the question that David asked this morning. He said, he said, raise your hand, right, if you believe that you're worthy of dying for. Everybody's hand should have been raised. And it's a difficult thing, I get it, because it's one thing to know that, it's another thing to feel it, right? That's so true, and that's things that we wrestle with. But the reality is, we have to see that. See, being a Christian, following Jesus and trusting ourselves to him, guys, has to go beyond just some philosophical idea that's floating out there and it sounds good along with a bunch of other things. The reality is that we have to take this in as well. We're never going to be satisfied if we just keep it up here. Right? How many restaurants you pass by on your way home, on your way to work, when you go into the grocery store, when you go into another restaurant? Right? How many of those do you pass by? I'm afraid that most of us are kind of like those restaurants. People pass us by, and they really don't experience Jesus through us because we're not experiencing him. Because it's hasn't gone beyond this little philosophical idea. And we haven't really ingested it. We know all the right answers or the things that we're supposed to say. But it's not experiential. It's not something we live. And we know that, which is why we like to pass the buck, right? Put the responsibility on somebody else. Put it on someone else. Don't let it be this way. Don't let your Christianity, who you are, don't let your relationship with Jesus be this way. It's more than just an idea. It has to become our reality. So the question is, which one is it? Which one is it for you? Knowing about Jesus in the mind is not the same thing as entrusting him, entrusting our lives to him. So why do I continue to use the word entrust? Have you noticed that? I've used the word entrust throughout this series. And you might say, well the passage, though, the passage says believe. And so you're adding to the word of God. And so we need to mark and avoid you, right? Why do I continue to say entrust? Well, here it is. Go back to John chapter 6 and verse 29. Jesus says this, "This is the work of God, that you believe." Yes, that you believe in him whom he has sent. Now, I know that we have the tendency to interchange the terms faith and believe. Okay? And I think I understand what we do, why we're doing it, when we do it, and what we mean. But words matter. If you were in the class this morning, words matter. And our understanding of those words matter. Especially when it comes to these ideas that we have floating around about faith and what belief is and what it looks like to believe, okay? So these words, they matter. But while there are lots of similarities between the concept of faith and the concept of belief, the way we talk about them, we'll use the same terminology even, okay? In fact, the Greek words are related. They're almost the same, okay? I get that, but there is a distinction. There is a distinction that we need to make here. So let's look at this. Believe. There's two O. That's the Greek word for believe. Then you have the Greek word for faith, pistis. They're related terms. Oftentimes we use them interchangeably. But when we talk about faith, what are we talking about? We're talking about persuasion. We're talking about conviction. But when we talk about the term believe, we'll use again a lot of the same words. In fact, you go. I encourage you, go look these up. You can come to my office and look them up with my resources. You can look at them. A lot of the same words are used to define them, to interpret them, to explain what they mean. But there is an aspect of belief, of believed, in all these other various forms, that is different and that does distinguish it from the rest. And that is the word entrust. Entrust, faith. When we talk about faith, we're talking about persuasion and conviction. When we talk about believe, there's an aspect of that adds to this whole picture, and that's entrust. Because that entrusting is a direct result of that persuasion and that conviction. So when we entrust, we give into the care of another. And in this context, the context of what's being entrusted is you. You're alive. And then the one you're entrusting to is Jesus. And so we're talking about taking your very life, your very existence, having it come out of just a philosophical idea and making it a reality where we literally entrust ourselves, our lives to him. Here's an interesting point. The same word that is used here in John 6 is used in John chapter 2 and verse 24. And based on what Jesus knew about the hearts of men, this is one of those first times, this is the first indication where John gives us where Jesus cleanses out the temple. This is in John 2. People didn't know what to make of him. Like, who's this guy? They didn't know what to make of this. And then John closes out that chapter and he says this, listen. Jesus knew. He knows what's in the hearts of men. And as a result, John says he did not entrust himself to man. It's the same word used in John 6 where he says, here's the work of God, that you believe in him whom he has sent. He who comes to me and believes, whenever we're hungry or thirsty, will be satisfied. It's the same concept. Why did they use the word entrust instead of believe here? Because the context bears out the meaning. And the meaning here is the idea of putting yourself wholly into the hands of another. And it's a concept that cannot be subtracted from the definition or the meaning of the term believe. And so when you're persuaded and convicted, it creates or leads to belief. And in this context, what we're talking about is entrusting ourselves into the hands of another one. So essentially what Jesus says is this. This is the work of God, that you entrust, that you give into the hands of Jesus your life, your very existence. That's the concept here. That's why belief comes from faith. See, when we think of belief, what do we think about? A list of things that we can agree to. A list of things that we can agree with. That may be a part of that. That may be a part of the equation. But at the end of the day, belief, when you believe, it's as a result of what you're persuaded by, what you're convicted of. You see the fruit of it. And when we're talking about this, we're talking about our lives, our very existence into the one who gave us a life is responsible for our very existence. Consider the language that's used throughout New Testament, throughout church history. Language that talks about this idea, that points to this idea of us entrusting and giving our lives into the hands of Jesus. Your very existence. You have words, you have phrases like dying to self, taking up the cross, have this mind in you. Life is hidden in Christ. You are not your own, and on and on and on and on we can go. And that entrusting will be the result of the persuasion and the conviction that he is who he claims to be. So if we actually believe, and I'm using that in our typical way of how we use the term believe, which is not wrong. If we actually believe what we say we believe about Jesus, it will show. We'll actually live like it's true. It will be demonstrated, seen in our lives. And the first thing will be the fact that we're now learning to entrust every aspect of who we are into His hands. It's a work in progress, but that's the picture. See, because our persuasions, the things we are convicted by, what we truly believe, that's the typical usage of the term, will determine what our lives look like, what we do, how we live. You want to know what you actually really do believe that goes beyond just what you say you believe? Look at your life. Look at the fruit that comes from it. Look at the decisions that you make. Look at how you respond to things. Those are all indicators of the things that we actually do believe. So if you want to know what you believe, look at your life. Because the things we're persuaded by, our convictions, what we really believe determine what our life looks like. What we pursue, where we seek satisfaction, where we think real life is found. And if we are truly persuaded, convicted, right? That's the term faith. If we're truly persuaded and convicted that Jesus is who he claims he is, then we are going to live like it's actually true. And when we live like it's actually true, we entrust, put our lives, our very existence into his hands. And if he promises to satisfy all of the thirst and hunger pains of our hearts, then no matter our circumstances, we can still be fully satisfied by coming to him and abiding in him. And when we actually believe what we say we believe, then we act like it's true. We live like it's actually true. So if we are entrusting our lives, our very existence into the hands of Jesus, then that means we see him as our shepherd. And Psalm 23, it becomes not just some easy section of scripture to memorize or a catchy phrase to put on a tombstone or greeting cards or home decor. It becomes a reality, something in which we actually live. And as we read the Psalm 23 and we listen to what he's saying there, we connect with that. It makes sense to us. But too often times I feel like we read that and we're like, yeah, that ain't my reality. Well, there's a reason for that. It's pointing to something much deeper. If we truly do see him as our shepherd, we're putting our lives into his hands. We will experience his unconditional love. And that's what helps us, right? Because how many relationships it's another thing we talked today. It's just been a great day. Relationships are so fickle. It takes hardly nothing to break them up, and it takes everything in the world to build them up. And they're still so imperfect, right? It takes nothing to tear them down. Man, when you consider the fact that Jesus thinks we're worthy enough to dying for, that creates for us a steady relationship on which we can rely, where he satisfies our need for the truth, for he himself is the truth, and he makes sense of this world, and he makes sense of our place in this world. He is someone who is dependable, is always there, always sure. These are the things we experience when we entrust ourselves to him. See, entrusting yourself to Jesus, it's all about encountering him. It's all about encountering him. It's all about relying upon him. It's all about running to him in all times, and that's where he actually satisfies. That's where he satisfies. And if you're waiting for the perfect opportunity, you're waiting for the perfect moment, right? To be kind and to be gentle. And typically the perfect moment, what does it look like? That's where it's easy to do that, right? We're looking for the perfect moment to experience this. You're never going to experience it. You're never going to have it, because here's the thing. Where you are right now is the perfect moment. No matter the circumstance, no matter the situation. It doesn't matter what it is, right? When things are good, when things are bad, at all times we seek him. We abide in him. We do engage in the work of God by being a light in this world at all times. Because the perfect time is the moment in which you find yourself, where you are present in that moment. And so if you're waiting for the perfect layout where you can just experience his love and his care and his compassion, it's always there. It's always with us. It's always around us. The problem is us. The problem lies within us, because our hearts are splintered. They pull us in so many different directions, which is why on one moment it's easy to trust in him, or at least we think of what we define what trust is, right? And then, but all of a sudden, while we've made this decision and we're trusting in him, and all of a sudden something happens, and man, it's like a split second, boom, we're over here, and like, well, I was over there, and now I'm over here. We have certain aspects of our lives where we trust him and we go to him, but it doesn't take hardly anything right before we pick up all the pieces ourselves, right, and we walk over here and we're like, okay, he ain't getting this figured out. Our hearts, they take us in so many different directions, which is why James 3, was that James 3 this morning? Was that James 3? Okay. I'm running on fumes, so my mind isn't always there. Even when I'm not on fumes, it's not always there. That's why on one hand, we will be fountains that spew out salt water and fresh water at the same time. That's why we can bless God and curse man. Or bless some men and curse others. There's so many pieces of who we are that are so splintered and fractured. It takes us in so many different directions. Jesus says, and these are my words, here's what I gather. In the moments where you realize that that's what you're doing, because it's not enough for us just to say, well, don't do that. in the moments that you realize. First of all, you need to be praying that God opens your eyes so you can see in those moments when you're doing this, when you're not entrusting these things into his hands, seeking his guidance. When you recognize that, you seize that moment. I don't care about all the 20 million times that you failed to do it. One time, you recognize it and you see it. That's the moment. That's your moment. You seize that in that moment and say, this is what I am doing. Lord, forgive me, but help me put my eyes upon you in this moment to seek you and what you need. Let me be in your presence, be very intentional about being there and staying there because it ain't working out for me when I'm on my own. So in that moment, you seize it, and your heart's going to take you somewhere else, right? And you're going to be thinking back, man, what happened to that moment where I was right there? Yes, and you can go right back to being right there. But the reason why you see yourself over here so oftentimes running after other things, not putting your trust in him, is our hearts are splintered. And the things we chase after, well, they're indicators that tell us a bunch of stuff about ourselves. And I pray that God gives us the eyes to see and the ears to hear, to understand what those things are, what they're telling us. But at the end of the day, even if you can't figure it out, you come right back here. Say, I ain't got that figured out. That's confusing to me. I'm just going to rest right here. I don't know. And that's all he asks. That's what sheep do. That's what sheep do. We come and we entrust ourselves in him, relying upon him, running to him in all times, and that's where he satisfies. Because here's the thing. God is that which fills up the void that we feel. It's God. God fills it. He fills it. Man, make the connections. Go back to Ephesians chapter 4. Do not quench the spirit. He says in the beginning of the chapter, you walk according to the calling by which you have been called. And he talks about all these things. He talks about unity and relationships and with God and what we represent and being a family and being united. And he says, so you got to cut off these things. You got to stop doing these things because these are the things that drain you. They don't fill up that void. He says, don't quench the spirit. It's God himself helping to fill up the void, the emptiness that we feel. God is that which fills the void. The psalmist depicted this very thing. The psalmist got it. He got it. Let's look at this as we close. Psalm 63:1. Look what he says. Oh God, you are my God. Earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts. Underline that word. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. John 4. Jesus explains to the Samaritan woman that he is the water of life. Psalm 42, 1 and 2. Nice catchy phrases. We sing a song based on this, right? And we're out here singing our hearts out. But does it ring true? As a deer pants for flowing streams, underline that. So pants my soul for you. Oh God, my soul thirsts, underline that. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. Listen, the image of water that is used in these passages, it's not a coincidence. Okay, it's not a coincidence. They're meant to connect us to the nourishing and satisfying, the life-giving stream that is God. The thing that we've been disconnected from. Psalm 46:1 says this. I love this. I absolutely love this picture. God is our refuge and strength, a very pleasant help in trouble. And then he goes down through a few verses here, I think it's about 2 verses here. Yeah, 2 verses here. And he begins to depict, kind of like this upheaval in the world. But in the city of God, things are different. Look at verse 4. There is a river. So let's back up. He starts off by saying, God is our refuge and our strength. I mean, that pretty much sums up what he's going to say. God is our refuge and our strength, and a very present help in trouble. And then he depicts this trouble, and it's like this world that is upheaval, mountains moving and waters taking over. And then he says this in verse 4. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God. And so while the world is in upheaval, that's not the case with the city of God. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. And then he says, well, actually, that river is God, which is why he says in verse 5, God is in the midst of her. It's no coincidence that he began by saying, God is our refuge and our strength, a present help in the time of trouble. And then he uses language to depict the upheavals and the movements of the world. But then he uses the same terminology to depict this satisfying, fulfilling relationship that we have when we're connected to the stream of life. Some call it the stream of grace, the river of grace. Then he says, God is in the midst of her, that is his city. She shall not be moved. Why? Because God is the source of life, her very existence. And so what do we take from all of this? Listen, God is our source of life, the source of our very existence. The breath we breathe is his. The life that we live came from him. If there's anything lacking, it can be found in him. The question is, as Jesus stated, and listen, we make this much harder than it needs to be. But the reason why it's so hard, it seems so hard for us, because our hearts are splintered. They're fractured. Our wills take us in so many different directions, which is why it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to ingest it and to be it, which is why you can't think of food and be satisfied. You actually have to take it in. So have you entrusted yourself to Jesus? Are you entrusting yourself to Jesus? For he says, he who comes, continually comes, abides in me, and continually believes and trusts in me. Will never be hungry or thirsty. If you're hungry and thirsty, you need to go back to your relationship with God. If the things you're seeking aren't satisfying, and ultimately they will not, and when that time comes, you know where to go. You know where to look. Have you entrusted yourself, or are you entrusting yourself to him?